of how the nafs prospers, how it fortifies itself. Because what happens is that when you are young, and you may have experienced this yourself as well, and if you're young and you're listening today, take heed of what I'm saying, as someone who's older and lived a certain amount of life. Because when you're young, you often feel purer and more connected to Allah Almighty. Why? Because the layers of the dunya either haven't begun to form or they are forming, but they just haven't hardened. So when you pray, when you fast, when you do different forms of ibadah, it can still penetrate through the layers. So your ruh is gaining its rightful nourishment. It's prospering and flourishing. But as you get older, you may have recently married, and then perhaps you've got a job. As you age, your job and responsibilities increases. So then what happens is that you have less time to focus on your inner self, on the nourishment of the ruh. So that connection with Allah Ta'ala, Allah Almighty, that begins to lessen. And then as the layers of the dunya are increasing, because you're getting further and further away from Allah Almighty, then you can no longer hear that voice of Allah Ta'ala, فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ, I am near you. Because you get older, these extra responsibilities begin to compete with your connection to Allah Azza wa Jal. And then these layers of the dunya begin the fortification process of the nafs, nafs al-ammara, the commanding nafs. Because it's calling you to the dunya and it's asking you, look at this, you want this, maybe you would like this, and it's forcing you to look at the dunya. And the more you look, the more you want, the more you want, the more you desire, the more you run to the dunya. And that's when the nafs becomes happy, because the layers are forming. And what happens is that these desires of the dunya, they affect our life and they affect our balance of life. Because yes, you have to earn a living. Yes, you need to keep your wife happy. Yes, you need to keep your husband happy. And then what happens is, as you're involved in these things, you become so deeply involved in the dunya, because then you may be working, you have an employer, you have children, then you have your in-laws, and you have your own parents and brothers and sisters and friends and other social acquaintances, and then you have birthdays to remember, you have wedding anniversaries to remember, engagements to attend to, dinner parties to go. And all these activities, all these events, because we've created this social network, all these webs of networks, they become layers upon layers, strengthening and fortifying the nafs, giving it room to grow, thus taking you further and further away from Allah Almighty. So what happens is, of course, is when you have so many responsibilities, then something has to give. Your life and time becomes divided. First you were one, and now you are split amongst 1 million people, and you have to get time from somewhere. So what do? What is the first thing that we do? We give less and less time to Allah Almighty. We think about Him less. We lessen our prayers. We shorten our prayers. There was a time when you were young, perhaps with your parents, when during Zuhr prayer, you prayed for Sunnah, you prayed for Fard, you prayed to Sunnah, and you prayed to Nafl, and you completed your Zuhr prayer in your own time. Just look at your own prayer. And then what happens as we get older? We sometimes then drop the Sunnah. Oh, I don't have time. I don't have time for my 4 Sunnah prayers. And you'll just read 4 Fard, 2 Sunnah, 2 Nafl, possibly. And then as you get older, you get more and being busy. Okay, I'll just read my 4 Fard, and you leave the 2 Sunnah afterwards. And then, of course, you leave the Nafl. And this is what happens. This is exactly with each one of our prayers. Take Maghrib. Perhaps when you were young, you read three rakat of Fard, you read your Sunnah, and maybe you read the Awabin prayers, the Nawafil. But as you're busy and you're rushing around trying to do things, what happens? And we end up maybe even reading 3 Fard just for Maghrib, or not even praying at all, forgetting our prayers. So this is how our life becomes divided. Or if we do pray, and this is just one type of ibadah that I'm giving an example. When we do pray, we are so concerned about everything else around us that when we're praying, we're not even thinking that we're praying to Allah Almighty. We're not worried whether we've done our wudu correctly. We're not worried whether we're dressed properly. For instance, when we do our wudu, we don't do it with absolute, in a luxurious way, We don't, make sure that the water touches our elbows and completely wet. We just quickly do our wudu. Who knows what patches are dry? We're not sure if our clothes are clean. We're not concerned. Don't have time for that. And that's it. Quick, and you begin your prayer. Not sure if your prayer mat is clean. Not sure if your heart is now facing Allah Ta'ala. Am I even facing the Qibla? No, just pray out of rote. And while you're praying, what happens? Also, all of us, what is happening? During our prayer, we were actually thinking completely of something else. Oh, I've got to do this. We might have a shopping list. I've got to do this, this, and this. I've got to pick up the children. I've got a job. I've got to fire someone, whatever. That list is running through our minds. So then each one of our acts of ibadah, whatever it is, they just become mere rituals. We no longer focus on the nourishment of the ruh, because that is its nourishment for the ruh, our ibadah, our zikr, our connection to Allah Almighty. And so as the ruh weakens, we cannot fight the nafs, because the worldly attractions are getting stronger and stronger, building more and more layers. And why does this happen? Why do we give more time to the dunya? Why do we give more time to the world and not to Allah Ta'ala? Again, because it's the al-ghayb, the unseen. We think, Allah Ta'ala, He's not going to fire us for any job. There's no stick He's going to hit us with. Allah will still keep you alive. He'll still give you rizq. He will still give you wealth, whatever is in your naseeb. If you have ill health, you make dua, inshallah, Allah Ta'ala will give you shifa. If you want children and you are going to be blessed with children in this life, Allah Ta'ala will still give you children. Because Allah Ta'ala still responds. He still answers your du'as. Even the non-Muslims, the mushrikeen, the kuffar, Allah Ta'ala answers their prayers. The calamity gives to us. And that's what we think. Because we cannot literally visually see Allah Almighty. We cannot perceive Him. We haven't learned the lesson of the al-ghayb. It's so easy to keep Allah to the side. Mazallah, we think, no, you know what, it's not so important. And so that lessens our connection to Allah Almighty. And then what happens is that the more you go toward the dunya, the more you run after this world, it affects our emotions. These lusts and desires also lead to negative emotions, particularly if you're not given something or you fail to achieve some things, then it creates negativity inside of us. What happens? If you want something, your parents don't give it to you, or someone has been a little bit rude to you, or you have been treated well because you wanted that protocol, you wanted that status, you wanted that respect, and the nafs is saying to you, you didn't get that respect, you didn't get that appreciation, they didn't say hello to you properly, they didn't give you the gift that you wanted. What happens? We then get angry with each other. We can be rude to each other. We begin to hate each other, and that creates enmity within our hearts. And that enmity, those negative feelings, that is sustenance to the nafs. It is its nourishment. It is its food. It is how it grows. Those negative emotions are its sustenance. And as these negative emotions increase, because that is what the dunya ultimately does, we often become more selfish, become more greedy, we become more arrogant because we've been given more. We forget about the poor, we forget about the needy, we become more selfish. And so as these negative emotions increase, our nafs grows. And then if someone else is blessed with something, part of the dunya, some worldly thing, what happens? We often get jealous. We become envious of each other. We harbor bad feelings. We harbor resentment. We harbor bitterness. We harbor frustration. And what's happening? The nafs is having a field day. The nafs is having a party. It's thinking, yes, carry on, and is feeding into that. Feeding into these emotions. It is eating these emotions and getting stronger and stronger. As the nafs then increases and the layers of the dunya are also increases. Can you imagine what's happening? So the layers of the dunya are fortifying the nafs so the ibadah can't come through. At the same time, we're constantly nourishing this nafs.